Before anyone in Virginia City, Montana, knew her name, Sage Josephine Honaker was the pride of her family back in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia. From the day she was born, folks said she carried herself different. She was polite when other children were wild, thoughtful when others were careless, and carried a quiet grace that seemed far older than her years. Her mother often joked that Sage had inherited all the stubbornness of the Honakers and all the gentleness of the women who came before her. What nobody knew then was that one day those same qualities would carry her halfway across the country in search of answers that had remained buried for years. To her family, Sage was treasured. Her grandmother often called her Sage Jo, while her mother simply called her Josie, after the middle name they both shared. The Honakers were respected people in their part of Virginia. Known for their skill with clocks, watches, and fine craftsmanship, they took great pride in their work and their reputation. Among all the stories told around the family table, none was repeated more often than the story of Sage's grandfather. He had traveled west years earlier to Montana Territory, where opportunity waited in the booming gold camps. He had plans to only stay 2 years and send the money back home for him and Grandma to have for retirement, but he never returned home. Only whispers returned, whispers of trouble, whispers of men who couldn't be trusted, newspaper articles that had no answers, and whispers that someone had wanted him silenced forever. The Honakers were respected people in their part of Virginia. Known for their skill with clocks, watches, and fine craftsmanship, they took great pride in their work and their reputation. Years before Sage was born, the family's watch and clock business had become more successful than anyone expected. Customers came from neighboring counties, often waiting weeks for repairs and custom work. As the business grew, Sage's grandfather began teaching his wife every part of the trade. What started as simple assistance soon became a true partnership. She learned to repair watches, restore clocks, replace delicate gears, and keep the shop running when he was away. Together, they dreamed of building a comfortable future. When word of opportunity reached Montana Territory, Sage's grandfather made a difficult decision. The plan was simple. He would spend only a few years working in the booming mining camps while his wife continued operating the family business back home in Virginia. Together, they hoped to build enough savings to provide security and comfort in their later years. But the plan was never completed. He never came home. Only letters stopped arriving. Then came newspaper articles, rumors, whispers of dangerous men, and the terrible news that he had been murdered in Montana under circumstances no one could fully explain. Refusing to let the business die with him, Sage's grandmother carried on alone. Years later, as age began to slow her hands and her eyesight, she needed help. That help came from the person she trusted most, Sage. Patiently, over countless evenings at the workbench, she taught her granddaughter everything she knew. While other young women learned social graces, Sage learned balanced springs, escapements, jewel bearings, and the delicate art of bringing a silent watch back to life. What began as necessity became talent, and what began as talent became one of the strongest connections between grandmother and granddaughter. By the time Sage Josephine Honaker reached her 20s, she had become the backbone of the family business. 6 days a week, from sunrise until lamplight, she worked beside her grandmother's teachings and her grandfather's legacy. The Honaker shop had earned a reputation for fine watch repair, clock restoration, engraving, and custom work that reached far beyond the mountains of Virginia. Orders arrived from neighboring states, and occasionally from some of the largest merchants in the country. That same afternoon, however, another matter occupied her thoughts. A businessman newly arrived from Baltimore visited the shop. He had seen opportunity where others saw an old family business. He wanted to buy it. The offer he presented was generous enough to make Sage pause and listen, though she had no intention of agreeing without first speaking to her grandmother. The decision could wait until evening. Family came first. It always had. As the sun settled behind the Appalachian hills, Sage locked the shop door and began the short walk home. Her grandmother's illness had worsened during recent weeks. Every day followed the same pattern. Work at the shop, then home. Back to the bedside of the woman who had raised her, taught her, and stood beside her through every season of life. Since the death of her grandfather in Montana decades earlier, her grandmother had lived much of her life alone. And after Sage's mother moved to Tennessee with her new husband, the bond between grandmother and granddaughter grew even stronger. Sage rarely left her side except when duty called her to the watch shop. The townspeople often remarked that the two seemed less like grandmother and granddaughter and more like lifelong friends. Neither woman disagreed. The older Sage grew, the more precious those evenings became. The summer evening air drifted gently through the open bedroom window. Outside, tree frogs had already begun their nightly songs, and crickets chirped from the grass beyond the porch. Inside the room, only the soft ticking of a clock broke the silence. Sage sat beside her grandmother's bed, a cool washcloth folded carefully across Helen's forehead. The old woman had been sleeping most of the day. Her breathing had become shallow, and each breath seemed to require more effort than the one before. Sage dipped the cloth into a bowl of cool water and wrung it out gently. "Comfortable, Grandma?" she asked softly. For a moment there was no answer. Then Helen's eyes slowly opened. They were tired eyes now, but Sage still saw the same woman who had raised her, taught her, protected her, and stood beside her through every hardship life had delivered. Helen smiled faintly. "My sweet girl." Sage reached for her hand. "I'm here." "I know you are." The old woman squeezed her fingers weakly. "Honey, I don't believe I've got much time left." Sage lowered her eyes. "Don't talk like that." Helen smiled again. "I reckon the good Lord's already made his plans." The room grew quiet. For several moments neither of them spoke. Then Helen turned her eyes toward Sage once more. "When I'm gone, I need you to do something for me. Anything. In this room, there's a trunk." Sage nodded. "I know the one." Helen took another slow breath. "Inside are things that belong to this family. Papers, letters, things your grandfather and I kept safe all these years." Her voice grew weaker. "I want you to protect them as best you can." "I will. No matter what happens. I promise." Helen seemed relieved. A peaceful look crossed her face. After another long silence, she spoke again. "Sage?" "Yes, Grandma?" "I don't want you spending your whole life working yourself to death in that shop." Sage managed a small smile. Grandma had worried about that for years. "You've always said that." "Because I mean it." Helen's eyes softened. "I want you to find yourself a good husband someday." Sage looked down at their joined hands. Her grandma said, "Sage, sell that shop if you can." Sage thought of the offer she had today, but decided it not the time to mention it. Not now, not tonight. So she simply squeezed Helen's hand and said nothing. The old woman seemed to understand. She gave a faint nod. Then her eyes drifted toward the window, where the last light of day was fading beyond the hills. "I've had a good life, honey." Sage felt tears gathering, but tried not to let them fall. "I know. And I've loved you every day of it." The words struck her heart harder than anything else. "I've loved you too, Grandma." Helen's breathing slowed. The room grew very still. For a few minutes, neither one spoke. Sage sat quietly beside the bed, holding her hand. Then Helen took one final breath, and another, a little softer, then no more. The clock on the wall continued ticking. Outside, the frogs and crickets sang on as though nothing in the world had changed, but everything had. Sage remained beside the bed for a long while, still holding the hand that had held hers since childhood. Eventually she rose and covered her grandmother carefully. Hours later she stood on the porch beneath the darkness of an Appalachian summer night. An undertaker's wagon waited in the lane. The men worked quietly and respectfully as they carried Helen from the house. Sage watched from the porch. The lantern hanging from the wagon cast a warm glow across the road. The horses started forward. The wagon rolled away. Tree frogs sang from the creek. Crickets chirped loudly from every direction. Sage stood motionless, watching until the lantern became smaller and smaller, until it was only a distant flicker, then only darkness, and finally nothing at all. Only the sound of the night remained. For the first time since she was a little girl, Sage was alone. And as the lantern disappeared over the hill, Sage understood something she had never known before. The house was still full, but she was alone. Continued in Part 2, The Trunk.